you as an average Muslim. So just because I have a good seerah lecture, wallahi, I'm not exaggerating. A while back, somebody approached me and he opened up some papers and he said, Shaykh, which stock would you advise that I invest in? And my jaw just dropped, like, what? Like, yeah, which of these stocks? Why are you coming to me? Well, you're the Shaykh, right? So this level of presumption, my area of expertise is the seerah, it's theology, it's tafsir, it's ulum al-Quran. I can't tell you which stocks to invest in, but the presumption is you're the Shaykh, you should tell me which stocks I need. Which stock would you advise I invest in? Now, I'm not saying a Shaykh who has expertise in stocks shouldn't be punished, but I don't have the expertise. He assumed just because I have knowledge in the seerah that I should have knowledge in the stocks. Now, you're laughing at that, and that's a ridiculous example. Let me give you a real life example. Practical reality. The average graduates of Islamic universities, Al-Azhar, Medina, Riyadh, these all universities, they are not taught counseling. Because counseling is not of the primary disciplines of the classical Islamic tradition. So to assume that a Shaykh of Medina or Azhar is automatically qualified to get involved in marital counseling, teenagers going through depression, suicidal thoughts, to assume that a Shaykh is automatically qualified to counsel is a big error, and we have seen the repercussions of that error across this country. Just because I know the Quran doesn't make me qualified to speak to a teen who's taking drugs. So your job as well is to understand what is the expertise of the person I'm speaking with. Is he qualified for this or not? And the problem comes sometimes the scholars themselves start feeling their egos get the better of them. And they start feeling, oh, well, the people are coming to me for counseling, clearly I must be a counselor. And it doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. And we see this most clearly when it comes to the politics and the political affairs of our Muslim home countries. And I'm not saying scholars should not get involved in politics. Allah knows I get involved in politics all the time. And my father sitting in the audience, he keeps on telling me, pull back, don't speak, pull back. I know this, I speak too much about politics. But the fact of the matter is, look at our home countries. One of the biggest problems is our scholars do get involved in politics. It's not their area of expertise. Now, pause here, footnote. There are some scholars, it is their area of expertise. Good for them. I'm not speaking about them. There are some scholars who understand, they have political acumen, they understand status quo. Good for them. But the default is a person who's trained in the Islamic sciences is not qualified to talk about political science. He's not qualified to give verdicts about what's going on in democratic countries and whatnot. And if you look at what's happening in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, unfortunately, there is too much of a line being crossed. Our scholars should know their place. And you, as people who are not in the scholarly tradition, should know the place of scholars as well. Okay, now again, that is a two-way street because indeed, some scholars do need to weigh in on these issues. But I say only those that are trained, only those that understand how the system works and are politically savvy should be involved in these things. Otherwise, the default is, these are not areas of expertise of the ulama. So, that's one way that we aggrandize scholars. Another way is that we assume that any fatwa from any alim must be followed. And this leads to blind fanaticism. Every scholar has his or her groupies. Every scholar has some people who are almost like a cult mentality around that person. And that's wrong. It is wrong. Imam Abu Hanifa told his students, don't take from me, take from where I took from. Imam Shafi'i told his students, don't blindly follow me. If you come across a hadith that you see is authentic, leave my opinion and go with that hadith. Now he's speaking to fellow scholars, students of knowledge. And the problem comes the average Muslim. What is this average Muslim to do? Well, they should respect the opinion of scholars and follow them, but not fanatically, not blindly. Follow them with respect. Follow them with a little bit of, okay, this is a human being. A scholar never substitutes the Quran and Sunnah. A scholar's ijtihad, a scholar's fatwa is respected, but it doesn't become something that you need to be fanatical about. And the scholar could be right, and the scholar could be wrong. Even in their area of expertise, brothers and sisters. Even in their area of expertise, scholars have differed from day one. In fiqh, in economic issues, in even some theological issues, there has been some diversity of opinion. And be careful as well, brothers and sisters, to understand this important point. Scholars are human beings. And if they are human, then they sin as humans sin. Unfortunately, most of us don't like to think along those lines, but it needs to be said, especially in light of what's going on in the world today. Scholars are not superhuman, they're not angels. Every scholar, without exception, is a sinner. Think about that. They have to be, or else they wouldn't be human. Didn't our Prophet ﷺ say, every son of Adam is a sinner? It's a hadith. And aren't scholars the sons and daughters of Adam? So, every single alim, without exception, has to also commit sins. You just need to understand that. Why? Because what we see, and I have experienced this myself, being a student, naive student, not knowing the reality of scholarship and whatnot, if you study with an alim for a long period of time, if you take notes and you attend his durus and halaqat, eventually, you will see his human side. And you will see some mistake that he has done. Whether it is something said in a burst of anger, his emotions got the better of him, okay? Or something, he was just rude to you one day, or something maybe even worse than this. If you are not prepared to humanize your scholar, you're going to end up rejecting his scholarship because of one mistake, one slip, one sin that you were not prepared to see. You have to realize everybody's human, without exception. I sin, my teacher sinned, all of the ulama sin. We wouldn't be human if we didn't sin. So do not put us on pedestals that we don't deserve. Appreciate the blessings Allah has given me and you, but realize we are all equally human beings. My humanity is no more or less than yours. And therefore, what tempts average people tempts ulama. In fact, sometimes the temptations of scholars are more temptation of fame, temptation of power, temptation of glory, temptation of being literally in the limelight. This is a fitna, a test that Allah is putting us in. And it is a test that He is testing you with as well. Once, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he saw Ubay ibn Ka'b walking, followed by an entourage of people. People were fawning over him, right? As you see in our times. And Umar ibn Khattab took his stick out and hit everybody there. And he said, don't do this. This is a fitna for the scholar and a fitna for the masses. Don't fawn. Don't show this servile attitude towards another human being. When he's teaching, sit and study. When he's walking, don't be an entourage. Don't be a bodyguard. Don't walk around him as if he's some famous VIP. Don't do that. Umar ibn Khattab is saying to whom? To one of the greatest scholars of the Sahaba. And he said, this is a fitna for you. Why is it a fitna for you? We're also human. We're ego. We have egos. We have thousands of people around us. Shaitan's going to inflate our heart. Our egos are going to go big. And it's a fitna for the rest of you, Umar said. Which means you are raising him higher and higher and higher. When he falls, and he's going to fall, it's going to affect your iman as well. And we see this all the time, brothers and sisters. If your iman becomes linked with a scholar, rather than the knowledge that he teaches, then when the scholar falls, your iman falls as well. And the mistake was not that of the scholar. Well, his mistake is private. The mistake was yours, that you linked your iman with a human being. The mistake was yours, that you didn't differentiate between the light of Allah coming through him versus the person himself. And that distinction caused you, that lack of distinction caused you to suffer. So be careful, brothers and sisters. Scholars are human beings, and they will commit sins. So, bottom line then, and by the way, this has to be said, and subhanAllah, I mean, this whole notion of celebrity scholars and whatnot, Realize that this is a modern term, celebrity scholars, but there have always been scholars that were super famous. I mean, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, wherever he went, he was known. But what we've seen in our times is because of YouTube, because of the internet, unfortunately, scholars have achieved a global level of fame that perhaps in some ways is unprecedented. And this is a fitna for the scholar and a fitna for the masses. And it is something that we need to be cognizant of, aware of. And I speak on a personal note here. I do not like it at all, and I know many of my colleagues feel the same way. When people come up to me and they fawn over me, and they simply effusively praise, what benefit will it give me if you just praise me? It's a fitna for me, and it's a fitna for you. And what I despise the most, brothers and sisters, and I'm sorry for calling all of you out, but I know all of my colleagues feel the same way. The issue of taking selfies with us. What will that gain you? Honestly, what will that gain you? Why will you benefit if you take a selfie with some celebrity scholar? You really want to benefit, make dua when you see somebody. Say, Shaykh, Jazakallah khair for all that you have done. And you know what I really love the most? And I will actually stop walking and speak with you. I know some of you have tried to take selfies. I've said no to everybody in this convention as of yet. I know some of you have tried to, and I'm walking. I'm sorry if you think I'm rude, but put yourself in my shoes. But you know what I stop? When somebody says, Shaykh, I have a question, and the question is intelligent. The question shows you've done your research. The question shows you are genuinely seeking knowledge. That is a person I will respect. That is a person I will stop for, and I will say, okay, this is the answer to the question, if I know it. But if you're just coming and you just want my autograph or my signature, I am not a rock star. And my autograph is not going to save you from Jahannam. My autograph is not something you can hang on a wall or sell on eBay for $1 million. If you do, I need a share of that as well. It doesn't work that way. And it is a fitna for you and a fitna for me. Don't do that with me or with any scholar. You want to thank somebody, say, Jazakallah khair, may Allah guide you and guide us. Excellent. You made dua for me, dua for you, excellent. Anything beyond this is not needed. So stick within your Islamic limits, as our Prophet ﷺ himself said when he saw a man praising another man. He said, woe to you, you have just executed, you have just chopped his head off. Woe to you, you've chopped his head off, meaning you've destroyed him. It's an expression in Arabic. Woe to you, you've destroyed him. Which means, when you praise somebody, what's going to happen? His ego is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's not healthy for you or for the person you have praised. Okay, final thoughts. I have 5 minutes left. What are we to do in light of all that I have said? The first thing, brothers and sisters, stick with the scholarly consensus. Stick with the differences of opinion within the scholarly tradition of Islam. If the ulama themselves are unanimous in a verdict, then follow them. Don't care what non-scholars say. Don't care what non-specialists say. And we see this all the time. We see this right now when it comes to gender, transgender, LGBT. Non-scholars are giving bizarre opinions. Oh, there are 2 opinions on this issue. No, there aren't. It's unanimously agreed that, for example, intimacy can occur only within marriage, etc., of a man and a woman. It doesn't matter what non-scholars say. It doesn't change the tradition. It doesn't change the scholarly opinion. So stick with your ulama. Now, if there is a difference within the scholarly tradition, in this case, your job is to find a scholar whom you feel, and this has to be based on your judgment, and Allah will not punish you if you make an incorrect judgment. You, to the best of your knowledge, find a scholar whom you deem to have ilm and taqwa, knowledge and taqwa. Just like you would hunt for a doctor whom you felt was the best specialist, and you are not a doctor. So I'm not a doctor. And if I were to go to a doctor for an important decision, may Allah protect me and you, suppose there was an important decision. You're not going to go to the doctor based on the convenience of how far he is from your house, 2 miles or 5 miles. You're not going to go to the doctor because one charges 100 and the other charges 120. You will look at the qualifications, the expertise. You will visit both and you're going to say, oh, this doctor seems to know his stuff better than the other. So it's knowledge, and in Islam it's also taqwa. Once you find that alim, then the safest thing to do is to use him as your default for your day-to-day affairs. Do not go shopping. What is it today, that Friday sale? What is it called? Black Friday, right? Don't go Black Friday shopping for fatwas, okay? Don't do Cyber Monday on fatwas. You do not go fatwa shopping for the best bargains on fatwas. This is your religion. You wouldn't do it with your health. You wouldn't do it with your house. You wouldn't do it with your investment. Don't do it with your religion. Stick with the alim whom you feel is a specialist and knows his stuff. Now, if you come across a mistake from that scholar, you need to assess what type of mistake is it. Is it a fundamental mistake that deals with his understanding of Islam? Suppose the scholar rejects hadith. To me, a person who rejects hadith has betrayed the scholarly tradition. That is not acceptable. Hadith is a part of our religion. And there are ulama who doubt hadith. And there are ulama in their own ways, right? They're not Sunni ulama, but there are their own free-thinking ulama and whatnot. And by the way, there are many popular preachers in Arab lands, and yes, in Pakistan as well. I'm not going to mention names, but yes, I am referencing that person. You have to be careful. When a person is rejecting hadith, then this person has betrayed the scholarly consensus of the ummah. These free thinkers are not the mainstream. And our Prophet ﷺ said, stick with the jama'ah, stick with the mainstream, because Allah's hand is on the jama'ah. And whoever breaks away from the jama'ah is breaking away, leading to the fire of hell. Do not follow solitary opinions, unique opinions, strange opinions that contradict the mainstream, the bulk of Islamic scholarship. And anytime somebody comes with a bizarre, unprecedented fatwa that has never been said before, then realize that person is misguided, no questions about it. Where did this person all of a sudden rethink through Islam and 14 and a half centuries of Islam? To rethink through Islam to such a radical level essentially makes you a prophet. So the whole ummah was misguided until you came along, mashallah, tabarakallah, and you saw a new interpretation of the Quran that nobody before you contradicts everyone before you. Now pause here. I'm not talking about modern fatwas like Bitcoin currency, like like stem cell research. Of course this is new. I'm talking about standard issues such as sexuality. You're not going to rethink through sexuality. Such as hijab. You're not going to rethink through hijab. It's something been there, done that. You cannot all of a sudden rediscover an ayah of the Quran that nobody knew about before. So, and other things as well. Clear-cut issues that the scholars have unanimously agreed upon. When somebody comes and breaks that tradition, I'm sorry, who do you think you are? Where did you get this knowledge from? Is Allah inspiring you? Where did you get this newfangled interpretation that nobody before you got? So be careful of those types of people. However, if the interpretation is within the realm of scholarly bodies, we find it in classical Islam, then we should give it some respect even if we don't agree with it. The four madhahib are a classic example. Taraweeh 8 and 20. Zakat on gold, okay? Music being halal and haram. There are scholarly positions, believe it or not, even if it's a minority. Ibn Hazm has his conditions for music being halal. I personally don't like those conditions, but still, I cannot deny that Ibn Hazm wrote a book on this, a great scholar. He has his position. So when it comes to issues that we have classical controversies, then we give some leeway to. Now, what if the mistake is not methodological? I know there's 2 minutes left, I'm done. What if the mistake is a personal mistake? If you find your scholar having committed a sin, this requires a little bit of tafsir, of detail. If the sin is a personal, one-off mistake that deals with himself, between him and Allah, then your scholar is just as human as you, and like you would cover the mistake of another Muslim, you cover the mistake of your scholar as well. If you come across a sin of a personal nature, a slip, a one-time, something that the scholar does as a human being in his personal life, then his sins and your sins should be covered up. Just because he's a scholar doesn't mean, astaghfirullah, you post and shame people online. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Our Prophet ﷺ said, do not follow and spy on the sins of other Muslims, or else Allah will expose your sins, even if in your own house. Cover up the sins of your brother. However, if the sins affect other people, If the sins are harming other people, in this case, go to the people of knowledge and tell them and see what is the next step to be done. The bottom line, brothers and sisters, not every sin should be exposed. All scholars have sins, and if you see a scholar slipping into a sin and you approach them, it's your right, by the way, you go to them directly. It is your haqq and your right. If you see a scholar, you go directly, say, what is this? Am I seeing things correctly? Did I see you do this? And see his interpretation, explanation, if you have seen it. And if it's only things you are hearing, brothers and sisters, and you are far away from the scene, well then in this case you do what every Muslim should do when gossip and slander comes your way. And that is, be quiet. To err on the side of caution. Allah will never punish you for being quiet. But if you fall into slander, potential ghiba, namima, buhtan, if you say an untruth simply because you heard it, there is a possibility you will be held to account for that. Mind your own business. It is enough of a sin, our Prophet ﷺ said, that you tell everybody what you hear. So, I know it's time. So, to conclude, humanize your ulama. Take the good from them. Overlook the bad. And if the bad outweighs the good, then leave them. If their methodological premises of Islam, or even their character is so corrupt, and there are preachers and du'at, and we seek Allah's refuge, they are corrupt to the core, these people you leave them. And it is Allah's sunnah that they are exposed, but you don't have to make it your job to expose them. It is Allah's sunnah that people who are evil are exposed. And people who have a bad core, they are displayed in public. But you don't have to become the witch hunt doctor. You don't have to become the FBI and the police and go investigate. It's not your business. Let nature take its course. Let Allah Azza wa Jal do His job. And you mind your business and take the good that you can from the people whom you trust. And if it so happens that you come across a mistake or a sin of a personal nature, ignore it. If it is more than this, go to the people of knowledge and follow the trustworthy, wise, experienced scholars of your area and your community. Look to those that have decades of service. Look to those that have wisdom and age and follow them. And because inshaAllah ta'ala they will be your best guide. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of the righteous and of the knowledgeable. I conclude, brothers and sisters, with a simple phrase that I say all the time. If you cannot become an alim, if you cannot become a scholar, then do not remain a jahil. Learn and learn and learn, and whenever you can, learn some more. Then when you get some time, read a book, then listen to a lecture, then attend a halaqah. If you cannot become an alim, do not remain a jahil. Learn whatever you can, and the more you learn, the more you will benefit in this world and in the next. And with this I conclude, and brothers and sisters, I have to leave in 15 minutes. I know there's a fiqh panel and a Q&A panel, so if you have any questions about this talk of mine, then please write it down right now and send it to the volunteers. There's going to be an open Q&A. I have a flight to catch, so in 10 minutes I'm going to answer my questions, and then I will walk off the stage. That's not a disrespect to my other speakers. I love them immensely, but I have a flight to catch in a little bit, so I will leave the rest of the Q&A for them. We'll start the Q&A with the questions directly to me. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.